on to chapter 1.3 about variables and data types. This is a big topic, so we're going to do it now, and we're going to review it basically all the time. It won't be there will never be a program that you write that does not include some variables and some data. So, gotta learn it now, and we'll learn it again. So in the textbook here, they've got a variable video for you that explains some stuff here that somebody uploaded. So you can watch that in addition to what you're doing now. And it's good to hear as many explanations as you can. So they've got a little picture here. So a variable, now I got a little notebook thingy that I can draw and use as a little whiteboard. So a variable has two components. Number one is a name. Number two is a value. So really the whole point of a variable is allowing you to store some data. So as you have a computer program, you're going to be dealing with all sorts of text and numbers, and you're going to want to do calculations and output different stuff. In order for that to all work, you need a way to kind of have a memory of what's happened and to be able to store some information as you're going through your code. So really all a variable is, and I guess, so name, value, and then I guess a third thing, and maybe I can call this thing number two. This is kind of what makes Java a little bit different than what you might have learned in the past with me or other people. So a name, and then in Java, a variable also has a type. So a name, a type, and a value. I almost forgot the second thing. So in Java, you're going to have a line of code. So the first thing here is going to be, they're going to put this in a different order, but it's going to go type will be first, the type, and we'll talk about what that is. Type will be first, then the name, then an equal sign, and then the value. Okay. So the most classic data type is an int. So int is short for integer. So maybe I'll put a little box over here. Data types. Okay, so data types. Int is a whole number. Okay. And we'll go through a couple more, and you'll read these in the chapter, but I just want to kind of give you an introduction. So an int is an integer. So an example, this is an example line of code. I'm just going to write example here. So an example line of code, maybe we'll do a few example. So we can say int, and so yeah, there's always a classic, well, let's say we're at the grocery store and we're buying apples. So we can say int num apples. An important thing about variable names is that they cannot have a space in them. So you'll often see us write things like this where we switch off the capitalization to split up the words. So int num apples, I showed up to the store, so num apples equals 0. Now that's a line of code, that's all good. And so what we need to think about as we're reading code and we see variables, this line of code here, int num apples equals 0, what that's doing is it's making in the computer, now we kind of have to use our imagination, it's making in the computer a little box, okay? And it's saying, in this box, there's an integer. In this box, there's an integer. It is called num apples. Okay? And so having the type tells Java, as we're working on our code, tells Java what kind of thing this is. So again, if we look up here, right, data types, an int is a whole number. We'll get to a couple others in a second. So int num apples and then 0. So you'll never see this on the screen when you're running a Java program, but this is what you imagine is happening in Java in your brain as you're looking at code. Okay? So int num apples equals 0. It's a classic example. Other data types. So you go to the grocery store, your apples are actually weighed, and that's how you do the price. Or, we could just say price. Prices are usually not whole numbers, they're usually decimals. So we could say price per apple. Price per apple equals, I don't know, inflation these days, I don't know, $1.50. Seems like kind of high. Anyways, double price per apple. So double, for historical reasons, is a data type. It doesn't mean double anything. Double is a vocab word that we're going to remember. It means decimal number. Okay, so something with a decimal, not a whole number. Then we've got strings. So we could say my name equals sign. These are all examples of variables in Java. Okay. So Mr. Meyer, string my name equals Mr. Meyer. String means, and there's a capital S for string. String means text data. So a bunch of letters in a row. That's what a string is. So in our imagination, this line of code here, this would make us, this would give us something that, okay, the data type is string, the name of it is my name, and the value is Mr. Meyer. As you're typing string variables, you need to include these quotes. And you'll notice all my lines of code end in a semicolon. Okay. Great. And then the other important thing that can happen with variables is that you can change them. So this line here makes a variable called my name. What you can do later is you could set the variable. So I could say my name equals sign, and maybe let's say I go and I go to medical school. I don't know why I would do that at this point in my life, but I go to medical school and now I'm Dr. Meyer. All right. So all that does, if this line of code happened first, we would get this little box in the computer. Okay. But if this, once this line of code happens, we scribble out what was there before, or we can really just erase it, and we put in the new value. So before it was Mr. Meyer, now it's Dr. Meyer. Cool. And then just one more data type out there is Boolean, and that is something that is true or false. This is just an intro to variables and data types. You have seen my pictures and my little explanation. You can also see the textbook's explanation. Let's just briefly see what they say. So data types, they give some fancier vocab. Int, double, Boolean, string. Look, I got them all. Int, double, Boolean, string. So they've got some multiple choice questions for you that you can use to practice. And it's good that they give us some examples here, which is nice. But these 4 data types are the only data types that we're going to need to worry about for a little while, so it's good. So declaring a variable, good. So they do the exact same thing that I do, right? They're drawing these little boxes with the name of the variable and the value of the variable. They're going to talk about bits in here. Don't stress about bits right now. I'll talk about that later. Cool. So this is kind of the, they give you a few different ways that you can declare variables. So declaring a variable, this right here is declaring a variable. This right here is declaring a variable. This right here is declaring a variable. This is not declaring a variable. That's what we call setting a variable. Okay, so that's the difference there. Okay. Anyways, so this is There's a few different ways you can do this. So you could declare the variable with no value and then set the value, or you can just declare the variable and set the value all at once. Okay. They go through some more code here with some examples of variables. You can run it. So they're going to update some variables, make a bunch of variables, print stuff out. You can see what happens. Cool. And then one thing to learn here is this plus sign is not, this is a string and price is a number. So if you're in math class and somebody asks you to add a piece of text and a number, you're going to laugh in their face because that's not something you do in math. However, the plus sign, when you're coding in Java, the plus sign is for concatenation. So concatenation means taking two things and smushing them together. So for example, I can give us a new page here. So if I say, what is it? What's today's date? So if I say, I could say July plus 18. If I print that, so imagine I wrote the whole line, but if I print this, this would print out July 18. I could also have int day of month equals 18, and I could print July plus day of month, and that would give us that would show the same thing on the screen. So in here, I'll do this for shorthand a lot of times. This is really in Java, you're going to say this whole big thing, system.out.println. So you could do that. So you're going to type that whole thing here. Sometimes as shorthand, I'm just going to say print. Anyways, so that's concatenation. And they give you a few examples of using that in this little example program. That's that. Okay. Good. They give you a couple multiple choice questions. Some debugging to do. Mixed up code. There's this thing, final. You'll read about what it does. If you put the word final in front of a variable, it means you can't change it. So like final double pi equals 3.14. You do that here, you would write code like this if the thing couldn't change. So pi is a number that can't change. Pi is going to be 3.14 forever. So that's why you would have the final keyword in Java. But you'll read about that. Okay. Naming variables. So naming variables is something that I will demonstrate for you guys. And there's you can pick whatever names you want as you're coding. There are good names and bad names. Good names are things that make sense. Bad names are things that are either too short to mean anything or don't make sense. So like if you name your variable x, so if we go back to my program here, and if instead of saying int day of month, I say int d equals 18. If someone's looking at this code, what is d, all right? So if we go, d wasn't very useful because d doesn't really mean anything. But if I have my variable name is int, where did it go? Day of month equals 18, then, I'm gonna close this little menu. Then this is much easier to understand as you're reading the code. So we're going to practice naming variables every time we code all year long. So that's all good. But they give you some rules which are nice. Another debugging challenge, some more AP practice, and the summary. So this is probably a little bit of a longer video, but this is super important stuff. as you go through the year, we're going to be able to go back and think about this video and what we talked about in here in this chapter. This is one of the most important things to learn all year. So hopefully this was useful. And again, this is a concept that we're going to review many, many times this year. So if it doesn't make sense the first time, it's all good. But important to get started learning, and we'll get it done by the end of the year.